Hello, hello, hello. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, awesome. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Nice to have you here again for guest 2 of our EHour Winter 2024 semester. We're going to jump right into it. Last week, got an education on culture, storytelling, marketing, a little bit of touching on some of our entrepreneurial mindset from our friend Marcus down at Ross. Today we're going to build upon that. We're going to touch on all the factors and constructs in the entrepreneurial mindset. And then we're also going to have a conversation here that's really going to open your eyes and educate you on what it means to choosing the right fuel for your startup. Not all fuel is created equally. To give us that education today, we're bringing in a friend and alum in the center who is an expert at the intersection of innovation, defense, and entrepreneurship. He works at MIT as the lecturer in the Sloan School of Management and executive director of the Mission Innovation Experimental Institute. And he's the managing director of Proto Ventures, a venture studio model, which is the hot thing right now. He's co-founder of a couple startups himself. He serves as a Colonel Select in the U.S. Air Force Reserves. He's founded and run many intelligence community programs, published in space journals, and naturally is fluent in Russian as well. He's got his MS from George Washington University, an MBA from MIT, and most importantly, his bachelor's from U of M. Please help me welcome Gene Keselman. You want to hit that slide too for him? Amazing.
I'm going to give you a part of my talk on the dual-use venture capital stack. Does anyone know what all this stuff has in common? Pieces of all of this stuff were developed by the U.S. government. They're what we call dual use. And you're going to hear that term a lot. I know you're not here to learn about dual use necessarily, but that's my kind of world I come from, is just by nature of my background, the intersection of venture, startups, and the government, and as not just a customer, but a funder. So this is just going to be a little piece of this. That's me. And I got to be honest. I came here to do this talk. I'm super excited to be back at my alma mater. But I really wanted to come here to apply for a new position that was opening here, opened up on Wednesday. But they said I don't have the right experience as a head football coach. And I can also guarantee I'm the only person in this room that was at the last national championship game that we won. So, by the way, congratulations to everybody in this room as a national champion. I claim it everywhere I go, and I brought this just in case anyone wanted to ask what I do here. I'm a national champion. So, all right. So let's talk about the why. Why do we care about this dual use stuff? Well, in the past, if you were a startup, and I'm just going to pretend like we're starting from scratch here. If you were a startup in the past and you said to your VC or to your possible investor, hey, I want to go pursue this dual use stuff, or even back then defense, I want to go work with the government, they'd probably tell you, well, thanks, but we're not interested in you because you can't do everything at once. You can only be either a commercial company or you can be a defense company, and also when you get involved with the government, you're just wasting your time. It's too cumbersome. It's not a way to commercialization. I think over the last 10 years, there's been a huge change, and that change has been driven by the government. And the government is much more open, much easier to work with, and really nowadays anything can be dual use. So the U.S. Department of Defense runs the largest healthcare system in the country. It's one of the largest bureaucracies in the world. It's got people. People need food. They need HR systems. They need back-end office systems. So nowadays, where mostly people think about bombs and bullets and things like that, anything can be dual use. And so any startup, when startups come to us and say, hey, I'm working on this research lab, I'm working on this AI technology, or I'm working on this new material, this new maybe this new medical intervention. Anything can I sell to the government? And almost in every situation, unless you're building a cat dating app, we say, yeah, I mean, I think the government will buy that. So when we start talking about using the government as a customer, I mostly try to put it in the perspective of the government as a funder. So I want to make sure that we kind of differentiate those two things. Yes, the government buys things, but the government also funds things. And so to understand how the government funding structure works, I think the really important thing is to also really understand how the commercial funding structure works. And so this is the part of my talk that I usually give, which is like the stark reality of how investment really works in this world, and specifically commercial investing through venture capital. So to understand the capital stack, you have to understand incentive structures. Who or what is the point? Or where does the startup actually fit into this equation? And let me just make sure, are there any VCs in this room right now before I start talking mad, what about you? Okay, good, because usually this is the part where they get really mad at me for disparaging the industry. But
for telling the truth.
In venture capital, you are not the point if you're a startup, okay? And I wish when I was raising my first couple times raising seed rounds, somebody had told me this, because I really thought I was the point. I was like, man, I have this great idea. I think we're going to be a billion-dollar company. Everybody thinks that, or else you shouldn't be doing it. Why are these VCs not taking me seriously? Why aren't they calling me? Why is it everyone at my door asking me to take their investment? And over time and over working in the industry, I've realized it's because I wasn't really the point. I'll tell you what the point is in a second. But in the government sector, in the government seed, when you're taking non-dilutive funding from the government, you are the point. Because the point is to seed the new industrial base, to create mission success. We need more companies doing more things so that we can succeed in our mission, because we need to use those companies for our mission success. I'm just going to go build this out. This is, I know, a little bit of an eye chart, but it's on purpose. Venture capital creates returns for their partners. So your startup basically takes money from them, and you go along your journey, and then you create return for that for the venture capital. And the government, they have two main jobs. So the black text underneath those two boxes is their main jobs. Venture capital main job is to create return for their partners. The government's main job is to spend money and have hard problems. And your startup journey basically interacts with the money chain through those main jobs. So venture capital creates return for their partners is the main job. So they put out money to your startup journey and then get a return. The government spends money along your startup journey. At the end of that journey, hopefully you have a new industrial-based company. There's a slide that's missing at the very beginning of this that basically says, what is a VC? And I think it create a little, you already know the punchline, but does anyone have a good answer what a venture capitalist is? Somebody's going to be brave. Yes, back there. Can you say louder? I didn't hear what he said. You guys? No. Anyone have another idea what a VC is? Yeah. So a company invests in other companies to get a percentage of that company to get a return. Yeah, that's actually well along the line of what I'm trying to get, what I got at before you saw the slide is, people think that VCs are investors in startups so that startups can be successful. The answer actually is VCs are money managers of other people's monies. And so you could be a private equity manager, you could be a hedge fund manager, you could be a VC. The point of all of those jobs is to make return for your investors. You're using other people's money to make a return. We're going to look at some numbers here in a second. But in that equation, the point is, who is the point in that equation of the example I just gave? It's the people that invested the money. You're not the point. You are a vehicle to return of that investor's money. Okay? So that's why this is a slide that the important thing is the whole point of venture capital is to create return for its limited partners. Okay, so I would talk about the stack here. This is the dilutive stack. We're going to just talk a little bit about VC here, but this is all the different ways that you can get diluted or be a commercially invested company. And then this is the non-dilutive stack. This is all the different ways you can basically non-dilutive capital.
And for clarity, equity means your ownership of the company.
Yeah, I get a little jargony and wonky here, so if I know this is a large group and it's hard to raise your hand, but if there's something you don't understand, if I'm using too much jargon, please stop me, because I'm used to doing this to startups that are already established and kind of already thinking about cap tables and equity and things like that. Okay, this is really important. A very basic slide, but really explains to you the anatomy of a VC. This is generally, 90% of venture capital works this way, is that the general partners, the people that run, does this have a laser pointer? Can you guys see that? No, okay, doesn't matter. The general partner, the people that run the VC firm, they create these funds. The funds have a thesis. It could be an early stage fund, a growth stage fund, and they invest in startups. The limited partners, on the left side over there, are the people that provide the money to the fund. They basically are the ones that want the return. And you can see here, if you're a large fund, what you usually have is kind of these follow-on funds where you'll have fund one, you'll invest in about startups, it'll be early stage, and then you'll have fund two that invests in growth stage companies and usually can do follow-ons for startups that came out of fund one. But the really important thing here is that look at all the limited partners there, governments, corporations, pension funds, funds of funds, insurance companies. This is all these, what do they all want out of this VC? Returns, that's all they care about. This is just a way for them to diversify their returns. Anyway, this is Mark Andreessen, if you guys don't know him, a well-known venture capitalist. This is what I was just talking about. A venture capitalist is a private equity investor, but my definition is VCs are investment managers. They're just there to make returns. Okay, let's get down to it. So this is going to be some math. It's not going to be hard math, I promise. But this is the most, I think, transparent and real explanation of how VC works that I've ever found. It's from 2016. It's almost 10 years old now, but I've not been able to find a better presentation of the stark reality of VC in my experience. So all credit goes to Upfront Ventures. I stole this from them, but it is really good. Okay, so imagine you are a VC and you want to raise money and you raised a $300 million fund, okay? Your LPs were universities, personal funds from large donors, insurance company, corporates. You raised a $300 million fund, which is, quite frankly, not that big of a fund anymore. It's actually probably a small, mid-sized fund. And the expectation from your investors is what's called a 4x return or 3x gross. Basically, you got to return the fund. Oops, sorry about that. Plus 3x on that. Okay? So you got to return $300 million plus another 3 times that, $900 million. Okay? And remember, this is a small fund. So has anyone here ever heard of the power law? Okay, good. That's what VCs and most of the investment world runs on. It's that 80-20 kind of rule thing is basically they need a few startups to hit huge because they know most of the startups are going to be colossal failures and waste of money. Okay, so this is the rule that you have to understand because you have to understand the incentive structures of the venture capitalists that you're working with. And you have to understand their mentality and why you are not the point and why you're not that big a deal and why they aren't returning your calls. This is the reason why, because they live under the power law. They just need a couple, 2, 3 big wins, and they need to make a lot of bets to get those wins. So let's take what by most standards is considered an amazing outcome, $80 million exit in 5 years. I think I would suspect that most of us in this room would take an $80 million startup buyout over 5 years. I think it would be a pretty good day. I don't have one of those under my belt, so I would take it. So the initial investment in your startup is what's called a $10 million post. So it's, let's just say the VC put in $2 million into your startup, okay? That means that out of a $10 million valuation, they have 20% of your startup. And I'm not going to get into VC math here and post and pre and all that stuff. Let's just take these numbers at face value. Unless you have any questions, I can dig a little bit deeper into it. But let's just say the VC invested $2 million into your startup at a $10 million valuation, and then over 5 next years, they added $2 million more dollars in what's called pro rata, which just means I want to keep my same equity share as more investment comes in. So I'm just going to keep adding money that's the same ratio to what I put money in originally. That's what pro rata means. And so the company is acquired for $80 million. That $4 million now, the 20% of $80 million, 16%. The $16 million is your return. So out of that $4 million that the VC put in, the 4x, it returned a 4x of $16 million, okay, to a VC. So that's pretty good, right? And any of us would take that in a second, right? You put in $4 million into something, and 5 years later you get $16 million. I would assume all of us would be in on that, right? Here's the problem. You didn't even make a drop in the bucket for what the VC is trying to do. So you returned 5% of the initial 1x that it needs to return, and 1.33% of its expected return to its investors. You basically didn't even move the needle for that VC. Even though on paper, you just are now an $80 million exited founder. But that VC with a 4x barely even got back to the money to its, I guarantee you on the quarterly report that it gave to its LPs, you were at the very bottom of kind of the return metrics, okay? So let's talk about a bigger return. Now we're talking about an $800 million exit. Your startup created an $800 million acquisition, almost $1 billion acquisition. You know, some more math, the same $2 million VC investment at the beginning. Now they did $8 million pro rata for the rest of the kind of the 7 to 10 years. You were acquired for $800 million. The 20% ended up being a $160 million payout for the VC. Okay, I'm sure you can see where we're going with this. That's a 33x for the VC on your startup. Here's the problem. You did return 150% of the fund returned, but you're still two-thirds short of the actual return that the fund promised. That's almost $1 billion return, and that fund, a medium fund, is still short 2/3 of its expected return on your $800 million exit. That is the point.
And if I can add to that, think about it this way. That's their return. That's not your return. And the notion that you're only giving up 20% of your company is how realistic?
If you exit your company in 8 to 10 years with 20%, you will be in the top 1% of startups.
You are going to give up the majority of your company to a VC for that fuel, that money, to run and build that company, okay?
Yeah. This is many, many more rounds of dilution that you have. That 20% by that one VC is matched by probably another 60 to 70% by other investors. So
but this isn't the only way.
This is not the only way. But this is the business of VC. Well, I think the point here is to set the stage for incentive structures about VC and the difference between venture capital and non-dilutive funding. So I asked my favorite tool, ChatGPT, to give me the definition of dual-use startup. And generally speaking, it's what I was telling you before. It's a company that both can serve civilian and military purposes.
The notion here is that if you're not taking venture capital money, and if you're having a dual-use startup that's running off of either solely or partially government money, you are not giving up your seats. You're not giving up equity. You're not losing control over that. And ultimately, you are the point. You are the reason that there's investment happening, and you will retain control and the ability to make the influence of why you wanted to go through the suffering that you were so passionate about to start a company.
So I don't know what slides you kept in here. I think that's the remainder of my slides, right? Yep. Okay. So I can basically summarize the kind of non-dilutive slide deck that we use here to say there's all of these different phases of government funding that follow on from VC funding, but the point is always the same. Okay. The point is always to create a commercially successful company. The government does not want you to create a government-only company anymore. That was the misnomer of the past. The point now is that the government wants you to become a commercially successful company, and if you have the choice to take both dilutive capital and non-dilutive capital to pursue that, you should. And it's now easy enough that you can, and the non-dilutive capital is a really great way to buy down risk on your technologies and your development of your service or your product. And then you can use dilutive capital, VC money, to grow and build your company. So hire people, pay salaries, do all the things to build a company. So think about it that way, is that non-dilutive capital is there to help you build your product. Dilutive capital is there to help you build your company. And so there's a lot more to that if you want to talk about it.
Okay, the slide.
Yep.
And so in addition to that, the government is a market. It is an opportunity to be a huge client. As you might imagine, if you're taking money in from the government, you're in a better position to immediately reapproach them as a client, as a potential market. And as you might also imagine, it's a very big one at that. There's a huge opportunity to make that impact. All of this was to go ahead and give you a sense that as you go through your entrepreneurial journey and you learn more throughout our courses, your head's going to be really framed around the notion of VC. VC is the epicenter of it all. That's where you have to go. You have to go to Silicon Valley. You have to go to wherever to go get your money to fuel your startup. Not really. No, you don't. And you need to consider what you're going to do when people approach you to give you that money and what it means and the stipulations on it for your company going forward, for you as a founder going forward. Yeah, question?
I mean, there's no easy answer to this. I mean, this is why I run all these classes. This is why we're getting into this more and more. One of the things that is really telling about the demand signal for this is that we're running now the Diana network of accelerator sites for NATO. So NATO is a alliance, right? It's a treaty, and they just launched a $1 billion VC fund and a accelerator network across all the 32 NATO country participating country accelerator nodes, and they picked MIT and a few other organizations to build the programming and the curriculum to teach the startups dual use. And so all the startups that are participating in that and the startups that participate in our dual use class, they're there to answer that exact question that you just asked. Is okay, I'm a researcher, or I have a early stage startup, or we're just two guys with an idea. We want to learn how to access the market. There's no book on this yet, and there's no really easy way other than you just have to start engaging the government and doing things like taking these sort of classes. It is a pretty nascent still industry, a sector or strategy.
Yeah, great question. I want to hop back to a couple different things. You're not an engineer. You didn't go to engineering school here in Michigan.
I did not. I went to LS&A.
Yes, you did. You went to LS&A.
Yeah.
But now you do all types of work in deep tech and tough tech.
Yeah.
How do you make that transition from being a liberal arts student to then going into a place where you're now exclusively working in that?
Well, I don't know if we're exclusively working in it. So the venture studio I run is in fusion and clean energy. MIT has one of the it's one of the centers of fusion technology. We have a Tokamak reactor, which is one of the only two technologies that have ever made a net positive fusion reaction. And so I will never, ever characterize myself as an expert in fusion. There is math and technology and science going on there that I can't even approach, much less get involved in. I think what I do, or what our offices do, or what our programs do, is enable the human-centered processes to allow other people, very, very smart people, to develop their technologies and turn them into impactful startups.
Okay.
So my participation is on the human side, on the acceleration of the process side. I let much smarter people than me work on the technology side.
Okay, working with the team. Part of that working within a team, of course, there's culture and there's management issues, and the notion of ensuring that there's an ability to communicate and establish a culture that has some baseline values. You posted a little while ago about the notion of the DoD culture and talking about this idea of non-dilutive funding and taking money from the government. You talked about the idea of change management and culture management needing to kind of be altered within the defense industry.
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that? What changes need to be made, and how could they be implemented?
Oh man, that's an impossible. I think this was one of my most
you got a lot of heat on
most
this.
negged posts. So thanks for putting that up there.
Anytime.
I worked in I worked at the National Reconnaissance Office, which is part of the intelligence community of the United States Department of Defense, and the thing you learned there is the history of the National Reconnaissance Office was that the first 13 or 14 launches that we tried to put up a spy satellite into space in the early 50s failed catastrophically, like blew up on the tarmac, just the launchers didn't work, the deployment didn't work, nothing, like everything failed over and over and over again, right? And this is even at the onset of the commercial space industry, this was kind of parallel to that. Nobody knew about this. This was the most secret of top secrets back then of technological areas. The satellite that they eventually launched, Corona, was recaptured, not by, how now you see something flying back to Earth with a parachute on it and just kind of glides down, or now Elon and Jeff are creating rocket boosters that re-enter and land themselves. Back then, you needed a plane to catch the satellite as it was coming back into space in a net.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah. Try to do that math to figure that something going that fast, re-entering Earth, and try to catch it with an airplane going about 400 miles an hour. So that ethos, that risk profile, is no longer exists in the government. Now, if you have one failed launch, everybody in that program is getting fired. And so there are pockets in the government and still in very, very classified areas where you have a lot of failure, and that's okay because nobody knows about it because they're super classified. But generally speaking, the government is super risk averse and super slow to move. So to answer your question, how do you make change? You make it that the way that we're seeing change happen right now is in small pockets of people inside the government doing things in small scale, making them successful, and that spreads kind of like metastasizes throughout the culture. So a good example of that is, does anyone know what a SBIR grant is? This is one important thing of the dilutive funding. This is how, if you start your startup, you will go after funding, is through a SBIR grant. It's basically the government's startup grant. It's a seed grant. It's how the government funds startups. And it used to be you have to do a 50-page application up to like a 30, 40 page PowerPoint. You have to have a SAM number, a DUNS number. These are all government-issued numbers to be able to apply for your startup to get one of these grants. It was unbelievably difficult, and nobody wanted to do it. And there were these 3 or 4 captains in the Air Force that joined this organization called AFWorks that were like, why don't we just try to do one that's easier? Why don't we like get a small pot of money and just make this smaller pot of money available to any startup with a 5-page PowerPoint presentation and a 2 or 3-page application. And they were able to convince enough people in power that this was a small enough idea that could take shape and be easy enough and didn't spend a lot of money that it was worthwhile. And that AFWorks process, which was probably only 5, 6, 7 years ago, started by 4 captains. And captain in the Air Force is a very junior rank for officer. Now has been adopted by every service, is congressionally mandated to be used by every single government organization that has an SBIR grant. And you have to have an open topic, which is what they did, which means anybody can submit anything. It used to be you'd have to submit whatever the government told you to by its requirements. So we are only looking for AI companies, underwater companies, and biotech companies. Now every service is mandated to do an open topic, means submit whatever you want, and if we like it, we'll fund it.
Software to hardware to anything between.
Anything, open topic, anything goes. And so how do you change this thing is you have to have small pockets of success, and then it takes a long, long time, but eventually these things catch on. But this was more to provoke these kind of responses than it was to actually, get my point across.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and there's a notion there that if not for these 3 captains participating and actively leaning into wanting to create change, it doesn't happen.
Right.
Which, when I think about the career that you've had and the roles that you've played in different organizations you've been part of, you could have gone and been in Silicon Valley and decided to be a tech CEO, take VC money, and just cash out, buy a yacht, whatever. You didn't decide to do that. You've built a career around service. You've built a career around service to higher education, public education, the armed forces, et cetera. Why do the students need to understand the importance of service going forward?
I mean,
what has service done for you?
I mean, I would not be where I am, 100% would not be where I am right now if I didn't have that side of my background, the military side. I was working in I was coming out of business school at MIT. I was working on a tech startup in esports, of all things. Even back then, I was the oldest person in any room by like 20 years working in esports. But it was my passion. It was the first time I had nothing to do with defense or the military. And I got an offer to take over the MIT Innovation Office. So I had to make a decision to leave the startup world or take that job. And I got that offer because of my military background. There's 100% correlation there. And as much as I've tried to stay away from the defense security stuff, it's followed me through all of these centers, through all of this work. It just keeps sucking me back in. And I think that's because the more the world evolves, the more complex it becomes, the more obviously conflict there is. It becomes, security and safety and global missions become more relevant to the younger generations. And so once you realize that global warming and drought and all of these things are not just the problems of the commercial world, but the problems of governments and the problems of defense. I can tell you from being in the rooms where it happens, every leader in the Pentagon is looking at not just the fights, the conflicts, but the humanitarian crisis parts and how we're going to have to deal with humanitarian crisis, as much as part of how that affects the mission as anything else. And so I guess the short answer is I've tried to get away from it many times and I just cannot. And now I'm just finally at this point just leaning into the fact that the mission is really important. There's some really unique aspects to it. Some of us can translate. There's people like me that can translate between the two worlds. And that's our role, is to kind of help bridge the gap.
And you're creating a situation where for their generation, for your daughter's generations, there's a better world ahead. It's an attempt to improve upon it.
I mean, yeah, take a little bite, take a little stab at it, the little piece that we can affect, and try to, make it a little safer.
To that end, you were born and raised here in Ann Arbor.
I was not born here. I was
actually, you're not born, okay.
I was born in a little city called Kiev, Ukraine. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No shit.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I didn't know that.
I'm an immigrant here as well, so that all plays into all of this.
Now the fluent Russian makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't get as much credit for being born into it.
You were raised here. You love Ann Arbor.
I do.
This is where family is for you.
Yes.
Give the students a sense, like you're all here now. You're part of the community, but as you graduate and you go forward, you will increasingly come to appreciate this. I'm not going to say cult that you've entered with being a Michigan Wolverine.
It's a cult.
There's something there.
I can tell you, I've been around for a while. It is a cult.
Yeah, in the best of ways. Not Kool-Aid drinking cult. But when we're talking about Michigan, what do they need to understand? How is the world going to perceive them? How are their employers, how are their colleagues going to perceve them because they're U of M grad?
Just don't be as obnoxious as I am about it. That's my number one piece of advice. Is So I grew up in Ann Arbor. My wife grew up in Ann Arbor. My entire family, bleeds maize and blues. You can see. My sister went to state, and she's been converted because she can't fight it anymore. My daughters weren't allowed to wear red when they were little. That's my dog.
It's your wedding.
And I got married just down the street at the Michigan League as well. My sister got married at the Michigan League as well. It is a cult.
What's unique about it? What is it that people perceive that you don't realize until you're out?
I work at MIT, which is a pretty decent school as well. But I tell everybody, I fight for MIT, but I bleed maize and blue. It's just, I don't know what it is about this place. Everywhere, I've been on 7 continents, and I got to go blue in Antarctica. It's just special. And, I came here on short notice. I was supposed to come in a few weeks. And you asked me if I could fly in on short notice. And there was no other school I would have done that for. I can guarantee you that. Canceled a bunch of stuff to be here in a couple days. So I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm biased, but it's a special place, and I'm happy to be back.
Oh, good, and be happier to have you back.
Can you guys do me one favor? My daughter really wants to go here, and I've been trying to continue to brainwash her. Can I get a selfie with all of you in the background?
Love it.
So that she knows that I'm doing stuff in front of Michigan students.
I'd offer to take it, but it wouldn't be cool, man. It wouldn't be a cool selfie.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Can I get a go blue? Go blue. All right. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It's awesome.